Hello and welcome to today's episode of Shopping for the Real You. And this month we are doing 31 days of self-care. And I can't think of a better person to talk about that than my guest, Denise Lampron. If you remember, Denise was somebody I featured a few years ago, and we have since become friends. I feel very fortunate about that. She is the director. Her website is called The Art of Mindful Aging. And this ties in beautifully with a post that I'm doing. I don't know if I'm going to post this before or after, but it has to do with courage. And Denise recently retired. It was a high tech, right?
Oh, yes.
Company after many years to launch this business that she does now. She's a very sought after lecturer. She's been the keynote speaker for Color Designers International Annual Conference. She has a published video series called Aging Unplugged, Bold Conversations on Women Aging. She was a speaker at the grand opening Bindu Center for Presence, speaking on the wisdom of uncertainty. I could go through a whole laundry list of her amazing, but today she's going to talk about a subject that is so pertinent to what we're dealing with, and that has to do with relationships and self-care. First of all, about your courage, you quit your job and just launched into this. You just jumped right into the pool. Let me just ask you before we get into the topic, what was that like for you?
Well, actually, it is something that I would like to discuss at some point or create a workshop around, because I've never had a child, and I don't think you have, but I've talked to my girlfriends about what it's like to give birth. And they've all said to me, I can tell you, Denise, but there's no way you're going to know unless you do it. And that's exactly how I felt about leaving almost 50 years of work behind. This year has been different than any other year. The idea that you're no longer getting a regular check, that your time is different. You don't have to get up in the morning, but what are you going to do with your time? So to answer your question, I started the Art of Mindful Aging several years ago because I knew that when I left work, I wanted to follow my heart and my passion and my calling. And that's what this is. And so although I had this transition year, this is what filled me. This is what kept me going, getting up in the morning and saying, how can I be of service to my community? So
it's just perfect. I love that. So, okay. I look forward to hearing about you developing a course around that, because I think it's really important, especially for women our age. But let's talk about the topic today. And so the first thing, just in general, having to do with relationships and self-care, does a personal relationship, or I guess any relationship, require self-care? I mean, the whole concept of relationship means that you're sort of working with the other person, but how does self-care play into that?
Andrea, I believe that we as humans feel that if we're in a relationship, subconsciously it's self-care. If we're in a relationship, then we will have someone to care and love us. If we're in a relationship, we have a partner to journey with through life. If we have a husband or a wife or a partner, then we have a standing in the community. And so we unconsciously think of that as self-care. But consciously, that pulls from a different part of us. We think of ourself and the other person as being the relationship. I'd like to suggest that the relationship itself is a third entity. It's the container for the two of us.
That's beautiful.
And it has an aliveness and awareness and an energy to it that if we get quiet and we pay attention, we understand what that needs, and we can nourish it and feed that. Then there's also the relationship with ourselves. That's vitally important. And that's part of the container too. So all of this goes together. And then at the end of the day, Andrea, everything is a relationship. whether it's with your employer, your neighbor, your pets. Everything is a relationship, and it all needs self-care. And how do we do that? How do we turn our attention to it? First of all, just embracing that it does need self-care. I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, it was, oh, if you could just fall in love, that handles everything. There's no work involved. You care for each other. You love each other. And okay, we know that that's a fantasy. Okay? By now, we know that that's a fantasy. So boundaries, setting our boundaries, that is such a good form of self-care, not just for us personally, for the other person, because you're giving them the honor of who you are and what you need so they can be better in the relationship. And boundaries also have a way of giving a structure to a relationship. And that's a wonderful place for self-care. Communication. That's the gold standard as far as I'm concerned. If you can communicate with your partner and know whether they're auditory, kinesthetic, and how they hear you and what they need, speaking to them. I'm auditory, so I'm very concerned about how I say something and the way, giving them compliments, genuine compliments. That's like putting grace in your relationship container, and it does so much for supporting the relationship.
That is so beautiful. And, I'm really glad that you mentioned that everything is relationship, because I know that sadly, a lot of my followers and readers are unpartnered at this point. Friends have recently become widows or widowers.
Yes.
And I think, one of the posts I'm going to be doing is having to do with finding your own tribe. I think one of the important things is to create relationships, find groups where you can, but then apply these principles. So this is gorgeous. And let me go on to I love what you said about recognizing how the person learns and hears, kinesthetically or auditorially. I've had to learn that with my husband because he's an engineer, right?
Okay, yes.
You know what that's like, having worked in tech for many years.
Exactly.
So it kind of leads into this. So what about the rhythms in a relationship? How does one's own personal rhythm influence the relationship, and how do you deal with that?
That's a fascinating one, Andrea, because we all have our own rhythms. What time do we get up? What time do we want to eat? What time do we want to rest? What time do we want to go to sleep? And that's our personal rhythms. Where can we intersect with our partner? So if you know what your best time is, and you know what their best time is, perhaps you can find a space that will be the best time for the relationship. For example, I'm an early bird and my partner is a night owl. And so we had to figure out what the best time would be for our relationship. And that turned out to be dinner time. And I had to set my boundaries around that because he's really a night owl. Dinner can go from like 9 to midnight. That's not going to work for me. But 7 to 10 does work for me. And that's become our sacred time, our ritual, our rich time when we share and when we spend deep connected time together. So I encourage everyone to find where their best time intersects with their partner and to create something special around that time. Really, again, interjects energy into the container of the relationship.
That is wonderful. That's very practical advice. I have the same thing. My husband's a night owl and I can't go to bed late. So finding that point where you can connect is just crucial. I love that. And there's another relationship that I think we need to talk about, because a lot of us our age and even younger than us are dealing with this now or are going to be dealing with this. And that has to do with the parental relationship, because a lot of us, I've lost both my parents at this point, but at some point, I also have several friends who have partners who are disabled at this point, who have dementia or Parkinson's. A friend of mine passed from cancer, and her husband took care of her for a couple of years. So I guess the question is, but this is specifically for parents dealing with parents. How do we not feel guilty about having a difficult conversation with a parent in order to help maintain self-care?
It's very challenging, really challenging. And the best that I've come up with so far is feelings. No one can really argue with your feelings, right? So mom, dad, auntie, whoever it is, I love you. I want to do the best I can, but I'm feeling really angry about blah. Can we talk about that? Really coming with it as honestly as you possibly can, again, with love and respect for the person. I've dealt with this with my father, and it has been really challenging. I suggest that how can one show up time and time again in a caretaking role if you're upset or you're angry or you're disappointed? Then it just becomes obligatory and transactional. And that's where the guilt comes in. And so if we focus on our feelings, it's harder to feel guilty about how we really feel if we're being honest with ourselves and with the person that we're upset with. And I'm using upset. It doesn't have to be that. It can be like, I can't do this every day, or this is too much, or we need to pull in. Whatever the conversation is, it's about how you're feeling and presenting that in the most authentic way possible, and enrolling other family members for support if that's possible. Creating task lists for other members who conveniently can't participate in the caretaking. Let's pull them in, let's give them an opportunity, because one day this wonderful person is not going to be there, and you want to have good memories. And if we all sit around the campfire and talk about how much we really do want to be there for you, it helps. Really does help.
Do you think that's also applicable to dealing with a spouse or a partner who is having health challenges?
So what I've done with my partner is I attend all the medical appointments so that I am aware of what's going on. I absolutely, because if they go by themselves, you risk that they don't remember correctly, or that they don't tell you because they're caring for you. So I go to all the medical appointments. I take notes. I know who the doctors are. I have all of the numbers. And whenever we come back from a medical appointment, I say, let's talk. How are you feeling? How was that for you? What are you concerned about? What are you afraid of? What do you need from me that I'm not giving you in this context? And then it just opens again for the relationship. It's open about where we are. Sometimes it's a timeline that needs discussed. That's where I am with my father. What would you like me to do? What are your needs about this? So again, it goes back to communication and really, really finding the courage to say what really needs to be said and knowing what doesn't need to be said. That wisdom has to come in there too. What does this person not need to know?
That's kind of a rich point. What does the person not need to know? What kind of things should they not know?
As far as I'm concerned, what isn't going to contribute to their well-being, that needs to be left aside, and I have to step aside at times and say, is this my own stuff? Am I really charging in on my agenda? So I have to pull myself back and say, that's not important. He, she, they don't need to know that. This is what's important. So I'm constantly challenging myself. Am I clear on what really needs to be said here?
Right. And I think that point that you made about saying with love is crucial, because it's one thing to be honest. It's another thing to be brutal.
Oh, no.
Yes. I know my meditation teacher used to always say, speak the sweet truth.
I,
So
I
I
and
think that's a kind of a good guide.
it's a wonderful guide. And I always start off with something positive about them, so that we start the conversation that's uplifting for them, makes them feel good, loved, and supported. I always start that way. And then I kind of gently come in with, well, what we need to do now is, um, so you have to think through all of this.
Yeah.
It's
And
not.
I think, this gives people preparation. This is like really valuable details to help them prepare for this. There's one other thing that I wanted to ask, and then if you want to add anything more, it has to do with our personal time. I think it's crucial that each of us take some time for ourselves. And if we do that, I know one of the challenges I've had is feeling that I'm I'm not attending to my partner as much if I'm taking personal time. Does taking personal space in a relationship mean there's something wrong in the relationship? What can you say about that?
Well, that's exactly it. It's important that we don't think that something is wrong if we need personal space. In fact, I'd like to switch that and say that it actually means you're tending to it. By removing yourself from it, you get some perspective, you get some insight. And so that's really caring for the relationship when you can step away. I am not talking about abandonment. I'm not talking about disappearing, but I am talking about saying, my dear one, I need some time to regroup and come back to you energized and vital. And that's helpful for them, for you, and for the relationship. So it's self-care in the most basic way. I don't know why. I mean, this is a current term. Remember when we were growing up, who talked about self-care? But then, we had all of this sort of, what's the term, passive aggressive behavior. So when we're honest like this and we take care of things, we can get rid of passive aggressive behavior. And that's not good for anybody. Nobody feels good around that kind of energy. So the idea of separating yourself, maybe we can reframe that and say, you're just extending the space. You're not leaving them. You're just extending space, and then you come back in, that kind of thing. Just moving it in and moving it out as needed.
I love that image because I think that whole world about that word space is very meaningful for me. As a former dancer, one of my teachers used to say the first thing that we did in the room when we would walk into the room, she would say, take space. And what that meant was to make sure that you had enough physical room that you weren't going to smack somebody if you turned or something. But it also established a broader sense. And in fact, you started to feel the whole room when you took space. I love that. I know in my experience that, there's that sort of separation anxiety. And then I go and do something. And whenever I come back, we're both fresh, we're refreshed from that process. And our relationship is always richer as a result.
I agree completely. And I always say, I missed you. I'm glad to be back. And I feel that. I genuinely.
Yeah. I think the operative word, as you said, behind these is honesty and being genuine. Sometimes you can say them and then eventually believe them. But I think when you come from a place of honesty, people sense it. They just know it.
And that's why caretaking really doesn't work when it is transactional and when it is obligatory, because you're mechanical. You're moving through what needs to be done. Right. Your heart and caring isn't there.
Yeah, I agree. This is just fabulous. Denise Lampron, I want to thank you so much for being a guest, but I also want to tell everybody how they get in touch, how they can connect with you through your social media. So give us a little summary, because I know there's a lot of people who are going to want to talk with you.
theartofmindfulaging.com is the website. Denise at theartofmindfulaging.com is my email. The same for Facebook, The Art of Mindful Aging, and the same for Instagram, The Art of Mindful Aging. So all of, yes, you're going to say something?
Well, I just had to add one thing I didn't mention about Denise. I think I remember that your mother was a model.
Yes, yes.
And so she has a fabulous eye. And so she also does personal styling. And what Denise provides, which is what I love, is this whole picture of what it means to age mindfully, including how you look, including how you feel about how you look at the different stages and decades of your life.
Yes.
So
that's so important for us.
So many of my readers, that's an important part. And I want to assure them that she has her finger on the pulse of this and knows how to deal with it. Once again, Denise Lampron, thank you so very much for being part of this 31 days of self-care. I can't think of any other topics that are really more important than our relationships, because that's what we are in the world.
That's who we are. It was my great pleasure, as always.
Thank you. Bye-bye.